The first time I truly understood what I owned was the day I lost my father. It was quiet that morning, too quiet even for the forest ridge. The kind of quiet where even the birds seemed to pause. I remember standing on the porch of the old cabin, coffee in hand, staring out at the tree line where the mist clung to the pines like something alive. That ridge had been in our family for over a century. Most folks did not even know it was privately owned. They thought it was just wild public land, forgotten, unclaimed. But my father had spent his life stewarding it, preserving it, making sure the creek stayed clean, and the woods never thinned too much. When he passed, the land passed to me. I was 54 at the time, a retired Army engineer with a stubborn streak and a bad knee that still throbbed in the cold. My name is Hank Delaney. Folks around town knew me as the Bulldozer guy, which was not wrong. I liked machines, things that made sense, things that obeyed physics and fuel, and did not try to manipulate you with bylaws or newsletters. The land he left me was more than just trees and rock. It was the entire upper watershed of Maple Creek, a network of spring-fed tributaries that flowed straight down into the town of Silver Pines. That creek was the backbone of the community, ran right past the park, the elementary school, even the clubhouse for the fancy subdivision built 10 years ago. That subdivision came with a homeowners association. And like most homeowners associations in Silver Pines, it did not know when to stay in its lane. At first, they ignored me. I lived up the ridge, technically outside their jurisdiction. My address was not even part of their plat map. I liked it that way. The road to my place was rough, unpaved, steep, often muddy, and that suited me just fine. It kept the weekend warriors and the Karen board types far away. I spent my days restoring the trails my father once walked, repairing erosion damage from old logging scars, and sometimes just watching the way sunlight played across the water. That land had memory, and I was its last witness. I was not entirely alone. My closest neighbor was a quiet widower named Joe, who kept bees on the south slope. He did not trust the homeowners association either. Said they once fined him for painting his mailbox forest green instead of approved black. He lived just close enough to be considered part of the homeowners association, and he hated every second of it. They think they own the trees now, he told me once, spitting into the dirt, like God himself needs their permission to bloom. We would laugh about it until it stopped being funny. It started small, like it always does. A letter addressed to me, even though I was not a member of the homeowners association. It came in a crisp white envelope with a golden acorn logo and a friendly tone that made my skin crawl. Dear Mr. Delaney, we hope this note finds you well. The Silver Pines Homeowners Association is excited to inform you of a proposed reforestation boundary update that includes parcels adjacent to Maple Creek. As a property owner nearby, your cooperation in ensuring compliance with environmental standards is appreciated. They were not proposing anything. They were telling me. I ignored it at first. I did not even open the second envelope. But the third came certified with language that made me pause. Non-compliance with Homeowners Association environmental impact guidelines may result in civil fines and enforcement procedures in cooperation with local authorities. I knew the law well enough to recognize nonsense when I saw it. Still, it bugged me. Why were they suddenly so interested in environmental guidelines on a property they did not own? Joe stopped by with a jug of fresh honey and a warning. They redrew the boundaries, Hank, he said, setting the jar on my porch. I saw the new map at the Homeowners Association meeting. They included your creek. My creek, I laughed. They cannot do that. He shook his head. They think they can. I went down to the county registrar's office the next day. Sure enough, someone had submitted a watershed conservation overlay that now included the upper basin, my land, within a protected area of interest. It was not legally binding, but it was enough to justify interference. Enough to give the Homeowners Association a pretense for power. They wanted the water. That is what it boiled down to. Their man-made lake, really just a glorified pond, was drying up. Summers had been hotter, drier. Their fountain did not spray as high. The fish were not breeding. And someone had convinced the board that if they could control the headwaters, they could stabilize the ecosystem. At my expense. So I did what any reasonable landowner would do. I fired up my old Caterpillar D5 and started clearing the upper trail. The road had been there for decades, originally used by loggers back in the 1940s. It had grown over in parts, but the base was still solid. My goal was simple: reopen it so I could access the far end of the watershed and inspect a landslide zone I had been worried about since the last storm. I was not damming anything. I was not diverting streams. I was just reclaiming what was mine. But that bulldozer would change everything. 3 days into the job, I felt something shift. Not in the ground, but in the air. Attention. Like eyes were on me. And they were, because someone had called the Homeowners Association police. And they were coming up my ridge. The first time I saw their truck, it was halfway up the ridge, right where the old trail crossed the clearing above Maple Hollow. A sleek black SUV with magnetic decals that read Silver Pines Compliance Patrol, complete with a fake badge seal, gold letters, and flashing amber lights mounted on top. It looked official enough to fool someone. But not me. I watched them from the edge of my bulldozer cab engine, still idling smoke curling up behind me. 2 men and 1 woman stepped out, all in navy blue uniforms with patches stitched on the sleeves. Their boots were spotless, their sunglasses mirrored. And the way they walked, slow wide stances, arms loose at their sides, it was clear they wanted to be seen as authority. They were not sheriff, they were not county, and they sure as hell were not law enforcement. But they carried clipboards and earpieces, and when the tallest of them waved at me, like he expected me to stand at attention, I did not move. I just let the dozer hum beneath me. He came closer, climbing up the uneven grade with a practiced step. The nameplate on his chest read Supervisor Nash. "Sir," he called out, raising his voice to match the engine. "We need you to power down and step out of the equipment." I did not budge. "Who are you with?" "Silver Pines Environmental Compliance Division," he said, flashing a laminated ID badge that looked like it had been printed at Staples. "We are responding to a report of unauthorized land disturbance inside a protected watershed overlay." I stared at him. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the audacity of it felt surreal. "This is my land," I said flatly. "Has been for 43 years. Long before your subdivision existed. Before your fountain. Before your little meetings with bagels and bylaws." The woman behind him, short, tense shoulders, brown hair pulled back tight, took a step forward. "Mr. Delaney, under the Homeowners Association's Conservation Enforcement Agreement, this activity is considered a Level 3 violation. You are risking erosion, downstream sedimentation, and habitat destruction. If you refuse to comply, we will have to escalate." Escalate to what I asked. Filing another fake letter. Nash's jaw tightened. "Sir, we are authorized to issue citations and request backup if necessary." That is when I shut off the engine. The sudden silence made everything louder, the wind through the trees, the click of gravel under their boots, my own pulse. I climbed down, slow boots hitting dirt with a dull thud, and stood facing them with 10 feet between us. I kept my arms crossed. Not hostile, not yet. "You are not law enforcement," I said. "You are not with the county. You are with a homeowners association that does not own a single inch of this ridge. I have got the survey records, the title chain, and the water rights to prove it." "You are inside our overlay," the woman said, tapping a folded map. "And you are 2 steps away from trespassing," I countered. They did not expect pushback. You could see it in their eyes. They were used to bluffing, scaring folks into compliance with a language that sounded official but carried no legal weight. It probably worked on the young families down the hill, people who did not want trouble. People who had bought into the illusion of order. But I was not one of them. And this was not their land. Still, they did not back off. Nash pulled a form from his clipboard and began reading aloud some nonsense about Homeowners Association Code 17.9 Subclause B compliance with ecological stabilization orders. I let him finish, then I reached into the front pocket of my jacket and pulled out my phone. "Smile," I said, tapping record. They did not smile, but they also did not leave. Not immediately. Instead, Nash pointed a finger at the bulldozer. "This machinery is in violation of subsection." "No," I cut him off. "This machine is on private land with full access rights. And unless you are here with a sheriff's deputy and a warrant, I suggest you start walking back down that trail." They exchanged glances. They had not expected that. Their bluff was unraveling thread by thread. "You will be hearing from our legal team," the woman muttered. "Good," I said. "So will the sheriff." They left without another word. I stood there long after they disappeared into the trees, the sun burning hot on my neck. My fingers trembled not from fear, but from rage. How dare they come onto my land with badges? They printed themselves threatening fines and enforcement, like this was some homeowners association theme park. This was the Ridge. This was Delaney land. Still, their visit shook something loose in me. I had ignored the homeowners association too long, assumed they were just petty busybodies with too much free time. I had not realized they were escalating spending dues on uniforms, building maps that included my watershed, spreading the illusion that they controlled it. And I wondered, why now? Back at the cabin, I pulled out the old filing cabinet my father kept under lock and key. Inside were deeds maps, water rights, geological surveys, even aerial photographs going back to 1964. One folder stood out labeled Hydrology, Upper Basin. I opened it, and there it was, a legal summary signed by the county affirming our family's ownership of the entire Maple Creek headwaters. I scanned every page, then flipped to a satellite photo taken just 3 months ago. Something caught my eye. A strange rectangular shape near the upper stream, bend one that had not been there before. I leaned in, heart thumping. Concrete, shadowed, obvious once you saw it. Someone had built a dam upstream. Not a beaver dam, not a log jam. A man-made dam on my land. I felt my breath catch. The Homeowners Association was not just trying to control the ridge on paper. They were engineering it, rerouting it, weaponizing the water supply to serve their needs, probably their lakeside clubhouse, their fountains, their artificial beauty. They were stealing from the source, and that meant war. I did not sleep that night. I sat at the old wooden desk in the corner of the cabin, tracing my finger along every topographic line, every watercourse, every inch of that damned satellite map. The concrete structure near the bend in the creek was not a mistake. It was not erosion. It was intentional. I had seen enough field work in my time as an Army engineer to know a man-made dam when I saw one. The contours were clean. The alignment was wrong for natural formation. And the size, roughly 40 feet across, meant someone had moved serious material without permits, inspections, or fear of being caught. Because they thought no one was watching. They thought I was just some old man with a bulldozer. I stared at the folder my father had labeled, Water Equals Power. He was not wrong. Water controlled everything in a place like this: drainage, insurance, property value. Especially in a region where summers grew hotter and creeks ran lower every year. If you control the source, you control the town. And somehow, the Homeowners Association had figured that out. I left at first light, coffee in a thermos, my boots still laced from the night before. The Caterpillar D5 waited like a warhorse near the slope. I cranked the engine to life, backed her down the trail, and started bulldozing west toward the upper bend where the creek curled beneath the tree line. The trail I was on was not new. It was old logging road, one my grandfather used back in the 1950s, back when the county still hauled out red fir by the truckload. When I was a kid, I would ride shotgun in the old GMC and count the switchbacks. My father always made me memorize the landmarks: the Widow's Oak, the Bear-Tooth Ledge, Eagle Hollow. He said, "If you ever get lost, just follow the water back to the ridge." Now I followed it forward. It was not easy work. Decades of growth had hidden stumps like landmines beneath the soil. The dozer groaned and lurched and chewed through brambles and rock, the blade slicing through earth like memory through flesh. The sun rose higher, turning sweat into rivers down my back. But I kept going, past the hollow, past the fork, until I hit the first sign. A metal stake, bright orange ribbon tied around it, freshly driven into the ground. Surveyor's mark, and not mine. I climbed out of the cab, heart pounding, and inspected the tag zip-tied to the shaft. Lot division marker, Parcel 17B, Silver Pines Development. Parcel 17B. I flipped open my own survey map. There was no 17B. Not on my land. But someone had tried to subdivide it anyway. And that meant only one thing: they planned to develop it. Or at the very least, pretend they could to justify their land grab. 100 yards farther, I saw the first bag of quickrete, torn open. Hardened by weather, but unmistakable. Then I saw the dam. It was rudimentary, but functional, poured concrete stacked with rebar mesh, anchored into the soil on either side with heavy machinery. A shallow reservoir had formed behind it, backing up the creek into a wide pool that shimmered under the morning light. Someone had diverted the stream through a plastic culvert pipe that ran downhill south toward the Homeowners Association subdivision. It was theft, environmental sabotage, illegal construction, trespassing, all wrapped into one concrete insult to everything my family had protected for generations. I climbed onto the dam and walked its length. In the center, someone had installed a small metal hatch, a control valve. I opened it. Nothing happened. They had already drained their share. I took pictures. Every angle, every detail. I marked GPS coordinates, measured dimensions with my forestry tape. I even pulled a sample of the concrete mix. Then I made the decision. I was going to tear it down. Not out of revenge, not out of anger, but because the watershed needed to be free, and because it was mine. I drove the bulldozer back to the cabin, took a cold shower, changed into clean jeans and a faded flannel shirt, and went straight to the county records office. I met with Marcia, a clerk I had known since high school, and asked for building permits filed under Silver Pines Homeowners Association or Parcel 17B in the last 12 months. She found nothing. But when I showed her the photos of the dam, her eyebrows shot up. "This looks like private construction," she said. "But there is no record of it. Not even a hydrology notice. Can you get the county environmental officer up there?" She hesitated. "Technically, it is your land. That puts it in a weird gray zone. They can inspect if there is a complaint, but only with consent." "I consent," I said, "and I am complaining." She chuckled, but there was something nervous in her voice. "You will need to document everything, Hank. This might go legal." I tapped the folder. It already is. The next morning, I returned to the site with two things: my bulldozer and a printed copy of the county water rights deed signed in 1979. I taped the deed to a stake at the trailhead right next to the fake parcel marker, and I wrote in red Sharpie, "Private property. Watershed rights in force. Trespassers will be filmed." Then I climbed into the cab, adjusted my gloves, and lowered the blade. The first strike was violent. Concrete cracked, shuddered. Water sloshed. A pair of ducks took off in a panic. I pushed again, harder this time, sending chunks of dam cascading downstream like a broken jaw. The rebar screeched against metal teeth. Dust rose in gray plumes, and beneath it all, the water surged fast, hungry, ancient. The creek remembered its path, and so did I. By the time I finished, the dam was rubble. The culvert pipe lay twisted in the brush. The pool had drained and the stream flowed clean again. I stood there on the bank, covered in dust, hands shaking, staring at the destruction I had caused. Then I heard tires on gravel. And when I turned, the Homeowners Association police were back. This time they were not alone. A real sheriff's deputy stood behind them, arms crossed. And he looked pissed. I did not move right away. The deputy stepped out of the truck with the steady, deliberate posture of someone used to walking into messes. His boots crunched over the gravel shoulder of the trail as he surveyed the scene, my bulldozer idling beside a pile of shattered concrete creek water rushing through the newly opened channel, and three uniformed Homeowners Association enforcers standing rigid and self-important like they were waiting for a promotion. I recognized the deputy. His name was Holt. I had met him years ago during a snowstorm when he helped pull a neighbor's truck out of a ditch near Bear Hollow. Quiet guy, fair. Not the kind who bluffed or barked orders just to hear himself talk. He nodded at me. "Hank." "Deputy," I said, brushing the dust from my flannel. The Homeowners Association enforcer Supervisor Nash, same smug face, same shiny boots, spoke before Holt could. "This man destroyed protected infrastructure inside a watershed overlay," Nash barked, holding up his phone like it was a badge of justice. "He is in violation of environmental code, property encroachment, and Homeowners Association water control statutes. We demand immediate detainment pending legal review." Holt blinked, slowly looked at me, then back at Nash. "You said he destroyed a dam." "Yes," the woman added, stepping beside Nash. "A vital structure built to stabilize creek flow during drought conditions." "On your land?" Holt asked. "On Homeowners Association managed watershed buffer territory." Nash replied carefully, avoiding the word owned. Holt turned his head back to me. "That true, Hank?" I took a breath, then handed him the folder I had been carrying. "Here is the original water rights deed, signed by County Registrar in 1979. Map is in the back. My father secured exclusive control over the entire upper basin. That dam was built without permission. No permits, no engineering review, no county record. Just poured and piped like they thought no one would notice." Holt flipped through the folder silently. His fingers moved, slow and sure eyes scanning the legal print, like someone who actually read for meaning. When he reached the map, he pulled it out and held it against the hood of his truck. "Parcel 17B," he murmured. This does not even exist in county records. Nope, I said. But it does in theirs. I pointed to the fake marker still staked into the ground beside the old logging trail. Holt walked over to it, crouched down, and stared at the laminated tag. You trying to zone land you do not own? He asked without looking up. Nash stiffened. We were acting in accordance with homeowners association policy. Homeowners association policy is not law, Holt said, standing slowly. And unless I am mistaken, you boys are not deputized. We are part of the Homeowners Association Compliance Enforcement Division. Private security, Holt interrupted. Then you are unlicensed, and on someone else's property. That makes this trespassing. I want him arrested, the woman snapped, pointing at me. He is obstructing environmental protections and threatening public water stability. You built an illegal dam, I said calmly, and diverted water without a license. That is theft. From me and from every person downstream. Holt sighed and took a step back, rubbing the bridge of his nose. All right, he said, looking at all of us. Everybody slow down. He looked at me first. You got video of the structure? I do, I said, holding up my phone. Photos, coordinates, date stamped, and samples of the concrete mix. Good, he said, then turned to Nash. And you? We were operating under the impression that this land was part of an extended conservation overlay filed last quarter. There is no such overlay on record, Holt cut him off. I just checked with Marcia. You boys submitted a boundary expansion proposal. That is not the same as law. You cannot enforce a wish list. The Homeowners Association trio exchanged glances. Nash's confident posture wilted, just slightly. Holt stepped toward him, voice lowering. You printed fake badges, issued citations, claimed enforcement powers. That is impersonating law enforcement at best. At worst, it is criminal misrepresentation. We were only trying to preserve the watershed, Nash mumbled. Holt let out a breath. Then maybe you should have started by talking to the man who owns it. The silence that followed was thick and uncomfortable. The only sound was the creek surging through the broken dam and the steady tick of my bulldozer cooling in the shade. Finally, Holt turned back to me. You want to press charges? I shook my head. Not yet. But I want a full investigation. I want their construction documented. And I want an official statement from the county verifying that I am the sole owner and rights holder to the headwaters. You will have it, Holt said. He pulled out his radio and called in a request for environmental services to inspect the site. Then, almost as an afterthought, he looked at the Homeowners Association enforcers again. You are done up here, he said. Next time you step foot past the creek line, you will be doing it from the back of my cruiser. Nash opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, then shut it. They left in silence. I stood there for a long time after their SUV disappeared down the ridge, listening to the water reclaim its course. I felt a strange ache in my chest, not quite relief, not yet, but something deeper. A sense that the land had spoken, and for once, someone had listened. Still, I knew this was not over. The Homeowners Association did not back down that easy. They would come at me sideways next time, lawyers' technicalities, maybe even try to spin the story in the press. They would paint me as a dangerous recluse, with a bulldozer and a grudge. Try to bury me in paperwork until I gave up. But they did not know what I kept in that old filing cabinet. And they had no idea how much fight I had left. It did not take long. Just 3 days after the standoff at the dam, I got my first letter certified. Of course, thick, cream-colored envelope, Homeowners Association emblem in gold foil addressed to Mr. Henry Delaney, which told me everything I needed to know. No one around here called me Henry, unless they wanted something or planned to sue me. The letter was 12 pages long. Legalese so dense you could have used it as a doorstop. It accused me of reckless environmental destruction, willful endangerment of community resources, and my personal favorite, unlicensed operation of heavy machinery in a protected floodplain. It concluded with a demand cease all activity on the upper watershed and present myself for a disciplinary hearing before the Homeowners Association Environmental Board within 10 business days. I laughed out loud when I read that last part. The Homeowners Association Board, they had about as much legal authority over me as the neighborhood book club. But I did not ignore it. No, I did exactly what they did not expect, I answered. I drafted a formal response and sent it back by courier. 3 pages, plain English, with the calm, clipped tone of a man who has been through more than a few briefings in a war zone. To whom it may concern. As per county records, tax filings, and registered deed, B179. I am the sole legal owner and water rights holder of the Maple Creek headwaters, inclusive of all tributaries upstream of Marker 16N. The structure you refer to was an illegal dam erected without permit, consultation, or right. I have since reported this violation to County Environmental Services and the Sheriff's Office. I will not be attending your disciplinary hearing. If any further false claims are made regarding your authority over my property, or if any agents of the Homeowners Association set foot on my land again, I will pursue trespassing charges and file civil complaints under California Penal Code for 602 and WAR 538D. Respectfully, Hank Delaney. I sent copies to the county, the sheriff, and just for good measure, the local paper. I was not playing defense anymore, and I knew they would get the message. Because bluffing only works when the other guy does not call. The next escalation came quietly. First, a man with a camera started showing up at the bottom of my trailhead. He would pretend to birdwatch or inspect rocks, but the telephoto lens gave him away. Then a white SUV with tinted windows would park along the ridge road for hours at a time, engine running, never moving. They were not brave enough to come back up, not after Holt's warning, but they were watching, waiting for me to slip up to do something they could twist into a headline or a lawsuit. So I gave them nothing. I kept working, quietly, legally. I rebuilt the trail with county specs, posted the survey lines with metal signs, and filed everything with the registrar twice. I even bought a trail camera with motion sensors and pointed it at the bend where their old stakes still lay in the dirt, like a relic of a failed invasion. But what I did not expect was the whisper campaign. Joe, my neighbor down the slope, came by one afternoon with a face like thunder. "They are saying you threatened them," he said, dropping his bee smoker on my porch. "Told the whole board you swung a shovel at one of their patrol guys and rammed a bulldozer toward their vehicle." "Seriously," I muttered, wiping grease from my palms. "Dead serious," he said. "Karen, the Homeowners Association president, told it at the meeting last night like it was gospel. Said they are considering getting a restraining order." My blood turned hot. I never even left the cab until the sheriff got there. "I know," Joe said, squinting toward the tree line. "But truth does not matter with people like that. It is about noise, confusion. If they throw enough lies out there, folks start to wonder if there is fire behind the smoke. And that is when I knew they were not trying to win in court. They were trying to win in public. Make me look unstable, dangerous. Some old crank in the hills with a grudge and a bulldozer. They did not need to beat me legally if they could isolate me socially. It was smart. It was dirty. And it did not scare me one bit. That night, I called an old friend, Elaine Rivera, a retired environmental attorney I had met back when I consulted on land development zoning causes in the early 2000s. We had not talked in years, but she remembered me. "You sound pissed," she said as soon as she picked up. "I have got Homeowners Association board members pretending to be police and building dams on private land." I said, "You busy?" There was a pause. "I will bring wine." Elaine arrived 2 days later with a satchel full of casebooks and a mischievous smile. We sat on the porch until midnight, going through every deed record, photo, and permit I had. By the end, she whistled. "Hank, this is a gold mine. You are sitting on 24 violations minimum, and they are all documented. I do not want money," I said. "I want them off my land. I want the truth on record. I want this crap exposed before they try it on someone who does not know how to fight back." Elaine nodded. "Then we file a civil complaint, not for damages yet. For declaratory judgment. You want the court to confirm what the county already knows, that you own this watershed, and the Homeowners Association has no authority here." "And the impersonating police?" I asked. "That is criminal," she said. "Let the sheriff handle it. But if you have got video, we will include it as an exhibit." I did have video. Every second of Nash flashing his fake badge. Every word of their threats. Holt standing beside them, arms crossed, calling it what it was. I had called their bluff, and now I was raising the stakes. The next day we filed. The moment we filed the civil complaint, it was like pulling the pin on a grenade. Everything got louder. Elaine submitted the paperwork to the county clerk's office just after noon on a Tuesday. By Friday morning, the Homeowners Association had already sent out a community-wide bulletin titled "Urgent Environmental Threats in the Upper Ridge." It was full of bold fonts, ominous wording, and a picture of Maple Creek running high from recent rains, framed to look like a flash flood. They called me an unauthorized operator. They warned of reckless excavation. They claimed potential impacts to the entire Silver Pines ecosystem. And the best part, they conveniently left out that I owned the entire watershed they were claiming I had destroyed. I stood in Joe's kitchen that evening reading the flyer while his wife made coffee behind us. "You should see the comments on the neighborhood app," Joe muttered. "They are scared, Hank. Homeowners Association has got them convinced you are trying to drain the lake." "I am not draining anything," I said. "I am restoring a stream they illegally dammed." "Yeah, well," Joe sighed. "People do not read the fine print. They see bulldozer and danger and go straight to panic. It would have been laughable if it were not so calculated." The Homeowners Association had always been ambitious meddling in gardens, issuing fines for wind chimes, but this was something else entirely. They were moving like a machine now, coordinated, funded, strategic, and it all circled around one thing: control of the water. Elaine and I kept digging. We spent days going over tax records, contractor logs, permit histories, anything we could find on Parcel 17B or Watershed overlay activity. And then we hit something. A subcontractor invoice from 7 months earlier filed under the Homeowners Association's name, but routed through a third-party landscaping company. The line item: excavation and concrete stabilization, Upper Maple Tributary Bend, 18400. There it was, proof that they had built the dam, quietly, illegally, and with Homeowners Association funds. We traced it back further, payments made to a hydrology consultant, also off books. Elaine raised her eyebrows when she found it. "This is not just petty interference anymore," she said. "This is coordinated environmental fraud." It got worse. I hiked up beyond the dam site one afternoon alone, camera in hand, GPS tracker clipped to my vest. I followed the ridge trail until it split near an old pine my dad once called the Watchman, and that is when I saw it. A secondary dam. Smaller, newer, hidden behind a false berm of logs and brush. They had built more than one. I stood there for a long time, staring at the quiet pool of water backed up behind it. This one fed into a black plastic pipe that snaked underground, completely hidden from aerial view. I followed it for half a mile before I lost it beneath a boulder field, but its direction was clear, straight toward the Homeowners Association's new sports complex and ornamental lake. They were not just stealing water. They were harvesting it, redirecting it through makeshift channels, feeding their infrastructure, and using my land to do it, quietly, systematically, like parasites. I snapped more photos, sampled the water, marked coordinates again. And I remembered something my dad once said: "The people who think they are saving nature are usually the first to destroy it when no one is looking." Back at the cabin, I found the original watershed map he had framed above his desk. It showed every creek, spring, and runoff vein in fine pencil. He had marked them all by hand, and the spot where the second dam now sat, he had labeled it Sacred Flow, not out of religion, but respect. He believed water had memory, and so did I. Elaine filed an addendum to our case that evening. She included photos, GPS data, and the subcontractor invoice. She called it Exhibit D, evidence of ongoing environmental manipulation. We did not expect the Homeowners Association to back down, but we also did not expect their next move to be so theatrical. 2 days later, they called a press conference. Not just a newsletter, not a Facebook post. An actual podium set up in front of their community clubhouse with Homeowners Association banners flapping in the breeze and folding chairs arranged in careful rows. Local reporters showed up. They even had a professional speaker system. And the star of the show, Karen Bishop, Homeowners Association president. She was dressed in forest green like some kind of environmental general, and she opened with a somber tone. "Good afternoon. Today we face a crisis, one that threatens the balance of our community, our wildlife, and our shared future." She went on to describe me, though never by name, as a rogue landowner who had taken aggressive and unilateral actions against watershed stability and was actively dismantling critical infrastructure. She gestured toward a poster board image of the first dam, the one I had bulldozed. "His reckless behavior," she declared, "jeopardizes all of Silver Pines." They clapped, some even cheered, and I stood there watching the live stream from my porch, hands clenched around a chipped coffee mug. "She is good," Elaine said beside me, lips tight. "She knows how to scare them." "Truth does not matter to people like her," I muttered. "No," she said, But evidence still does, and that is what we have. That night, we finished compiling the complete case file. Photos, dates, county maps, water diversion charts. We even added historical rainfall data to prove that the Homeowners Association's lake losses were not from drought, they were self-inflicted mismanagement. By morning, the full complaint was live in the county docket system. It was not just a personal battle now. It was public, and the cracks in their facade had only just begun to show. The knock came early, just after sunrise, while the coffee was still steeping and the frost had not yet melted from the pine needles. I opened the cabin door expecting Joe, or maybe Elaine with another round of paperwork, but it was not either of them. It was Deputy Holt. He stood there with his hat in his hands, and a look that was somewhere between concern and curiosity. "Morning, Hank," he said. "Morning, Deputy." He glanced down the trail behind him, where his cruiser idled quietly under the trees. "Mind if I come in for a minute?" I stepped aside and let him in. He did not sit, just stood there scanning the maps tacked on my wall, the file folders laid out across the dining table, the boxes of old records I had pulled from my father's crawl space. "I have been getting a lot of calls," he said finally. "About me. About everything." He looked over at me. "Karen Bishop is trying to paint you as some kind of extremist. Said you are sabotaging infrastructure, threatening Homeowners Association officials, digging up the ridge like a madman." I did not respond. I just walked over to the desk, pulled open the bottom drawer, and retrieved the accordion binder I had labeled Firepower. It was not ammunition. It was legal history. My father had been meticulous. Every grant, every survey, every line on a map had a signature. Every signature had a copy, and every copy had a backup stored in that drawer. I laid it on the table and opened it slowly, letting the pages fan out like a loaded deck of cards. There I said, pointing. Deed from 1948, signed by Judge Warren Lane, confirming water rights inherited through the Homestead Act. That one I flipped a few more pages shows our family's exclusive control over diversion, floodplain management, and ecological modification, filed and recorded every decade. Last update was 2015, just after Dad passed. Holt nodded. "I believe you, Hank. You know I do. But Karen has got the town whipped up. They are scared. And when people are scared, they start looking for someone to blame. She should have thought of that before she broke the law," I said, sliding over a photo of the second hidden dam. "That pipe right there runs under County Parcel 12G. She is not just trespassing, she is committing infrastructure fraud." He let out a breath. "I am not here to argue. I just wanted you to know they are planning something." I raised an eyebrow. "She is filing a restraining order." I blinked. "You are kidding." He shook his head. "Claims you are a danger to the community, that you have created a hostile environment and interfered with Homeowners Association operations." I leaned back in my chair, laughing bitterly. "She has impersonated law enforcement, rerouted water through illegal dams, defamed me publicly, and I am the one being restrained. That is the game," Hank Holt said. "You poke the bear bites back. Then maybe it is time the bear faced a bigger predator." That afternoon, Elaine and I filed a counter motion. We requested an injunction against the Homeowners Association for ongoing harassment, trespassing, and unauthorized construction. Attached were photos, drone footage, and a forensic breakdown of the concrete samples we had taken showing they contained fast-set chemicals not approved for wetland use. We also added 3 sworn affidavits from neighbors, including Joe, who confirmed they had witnessed Homeowners Association compliance officers crossing onto my land without permission. Elaine's language was sharp, professional, and devastating. The plaintiff's property has been subject to systematic, deliberate interference by an unelected body whose actions exceed any mandate granted under their bylaws or county jurisdiction. This is not neighborly dispute. This is institutional abuse. It caught fire fast. Within 48 hours, the case made local news. Channel 9 ran a segment titled "Watershed Wars Homeowner Battles Homeowners Association Over Land Rights." They interviewed Elaine, showed aerial footage of the dam, even quoted my father's 1979 speech at the county hall where he warned against bureaucracies that mistake control for stewardship. The public response, mixed. Some folks backed the Homeowners Association, saying I was selfish, aggressive, out of touch. But others started asking real questions. Questions like, who gave the Homeowners Association permission to build dams? Why were they redrawing maps that did not belong to them? Why did a group of unelected volunteers have more power than a landowner with 100 years of deeded rights? Karen tried to spin it, of course. She gave a press statement standing in front of the artificial lake, talking about community preservation, climate resilience, and coordinated ecological management. She never mentioned the unauthorized concrete or the fake parcel filings, but people were listening less because we had shifted the story. No longer was I just a cranky man with a bulldozer. Now I was the guy who stood up to a power-drunk board and forced them into the sunlight, and they hated that. I got emails from strangers thanking me. Old ranchers, retired hydrologists, even a few ex-homeowners association members who had been quietly pushed out when they questioned Karen's expansion agenda. One message stuck with me. It came from a man named Victor Tran, a city water analyst. He wrote, "I reviewed your filings. You are sitting on a hydrological choke point. If you ever wanted to file for conservation protection or even establish a community-managed reserve, you could block the Homeowners Association permanently." Just a thought. A choke point. The term stayed with me, because that is what Karen had been after all along. Not the creek, not the dam, not even the lake. She wanted control, of flow, of leverage, of the very thing that gave Silver Pines its green lawns, its fountains, its power. And she thought no one would notice until it was too late. But I had noticed. I opened the filing cabinet again that night, pulling out one last folder marked with a faded blue sticker. Delaney, Easement Agreements. Unexecuted. Inside were documents my father had drafted but never filed. Plans for a protected watershed trust. Agreements with the county and local tribes. Even a charter for a nonprofit land conservancy. He never finished it, but I would. Because this was not just about dams anymore. It was about legacy and justice and making damn sure no one ever mistook Homeowners Association arrogance for authority again. The rain came in sheets that morning, cold gray, persistent. The kind that made the ridge trails slick as butter and turned dry creek beds into sudden rivers. I stood at the window with a mug in my hand, steam curling into the air, and watched the pine branches sway like nervous dancers. The storm could not have come at a better time. A county environmental officer was due to arrive at noon to inspect the dam sites. We had requested the visit 2 weeks earlier, but bureaucracies move like molasses uphill. Now with the weather turning and runoff threatening to overwhelm the ridge, they finally agreed to take it seriously. Elaine was already at the trailhead with 2 interns and a drone operator. I had hired a backhoe crew to assist with debris removal just in case we were asked to clear anything dangerous. Everything was legal, everything documented. But I had one more thing planned. It was not just about cleanup anymore. It was time to take the fight to the heart of it all, the largest, most reinforced of the Homeowners Association's illegal structures, the main concrete dam. It sat like a scar across the upper bend of Maple Creek. Roughly 60 feet wide, about 6 feet tall, with rebar mesh, and poured forms meant to survive decades of pressure. But it had no business existing, no permit, no engineering review, no legal right. It was the linchpin. Everything downstream, the culvert pipes, the water theft, the fake environmental overlays, started from that structure. If it stayed up, they would keep arguing their case. If it came down, so did their story. And I had just the machine to bring it down. The Caterpillar D5, old, yellow, stubborn, powerful. My bulldozer was as much a part of this ridge as the trees themselves. I had used it to clear storm debris, repair erosion gullies, and once even to drag out an abandoned SUV someone dumped on my trail. But today, it would do something bigger. It would tear down a monument to arrogance. I got to the site before anyone else. The creek was running high foam curling around the dam edges, the pool behind it swelling like a balloon about to pop. I parked the truck, walked the site perimeter, and checked for wildlife. No deer, no nests, just mud concrete and fast-moving water. Then I heard the low rumble of the bulldozer. One of the backhoe guys, Marcus, had started it for me. "She is ready," he said, climbing down from the cab and handing me the keys. "Tracks greased, blades steady. Appreciate you." He hesitated. "You sure you want to do this yourself? We can wait for the officer to give the nod." "She will be here," I said. "But this dam will not wait. It is holding back more than water." And then I climbed up. The cabin smelled like diesel and memory. I settled into the cracked leather seat, adjusted the throttle, and rolled forward. The ground squished beneath the treads, wet earth pushed aside like pudding. The rain made it hard to see, but I knew this land like my own palm. The bulldozer reached the edge. I eased it down into the shallow bank beside the dam, then raised the blade. One breath in, then I dropped it. The first hit echoed like thunder. Concrete cracked and spat chunks into the current. The blade bit again this time, deeper, pulling rebar loose like metal vines torn from rock. The water surged through the new gaps, roaring in approval. Elaine's voice crackled over the radio. "We have got video from the drone. This is perfect. Keep going, Hank. That middle wall is thin. You are almost through." I did not need the encouragement. This was personal. The second strike sheared off the control box. They had installed some cheap plastic valve meant to simulate regulation. It tumbled into the creek and vanished beneath the current. I reversed, then surged forward, the caterpillar groaning with effort as it forced the broken slab backward into the stream bed. Suddenly the wall gave way. Water thundered through the breach, white and foaming, cascading down the slope in a flood of freedom. Sediment and rock tumbled after it, and the entire pool began to collapse. The dam did not fall all at once. It crumbled slow and angry, like it knew it was not supposed to exist. I stepped out of the cab, soaked to the bone, heart pounding in my ears. Behind me, the county officer had arrived. She wore a poncho and heavy boots and held a clipboard now rendered useless by the rain. Her eyes widened as she took in the scene, what remained of the dam, the exposed rebar, the gouged soil. "You did this?" she asked. With documentation, Elaine chimed in behind her, waving the permits. Every strike, every measurement, every reason. All legal, all submitted. The dam was unpermitted and built without jurisdiction on private land. He just removed a hazard. The officer stared at the flowing creek, then nodded slowly. This matches the complaint. And the evidence. I will file my report today." We all stood there in silence for a moment, watching the water return to its natural course. No one cheered, no one clapped, but we did not need to. Because justice rarely makes noise. It just moves forward. That afternoon, I received a letter from the sheriff's office, official seal, signed by Holt himself. An investigation has been formally opened into the Homeowners Association's environmental activities, including unauthorized construction, false representation, and trespassing. Your cooperation has been noted. Your evidence has been critical. It was the first time in months I exhaled fully, but that was not the end. 2 days later, Karen Bishop stood in front of a county judge and tried to explain why the Homeowners Association had reallocated $60,000 from landscaping to stream stabilization without notifying residents. Her voice cracked as the drone footage played behind her on the courtroom screen. Me, in the rain, toppling the dam she had tried so hard to hide. She looked small then, smaller than I had ever seen her. The judge did not rule that day. It would take weeks for the process to play out. But the tide had shifted, not just in the creek, but in the hearts of people who finally saw the truth. And the blade that cut through concrete. It had done more than clear a stream. It had carved a path forward. The story did not stay local for long. Within a week of the dam's demolition, the footage went viral. A drone clip, originally meant for the court file, was picked up by a local station, then syndicated statewide. Within days, it landed on national outlets with headlines like, "Veteran landowner bulldozes illegal homeowners association dam in defiant showdown." "Water Wars retired engineer destroys rogue structure built by homeowners association." Homeowners Association police implicated in unauthorized environmental scheme. They showed me in the rain, soaked to the skin, steering the bulldozer through the dam like a man with nothing to lose. The internet ate it up. Some called me a hero. Others called me crazy. But one thing was clear. People were paying attention, and the Homeowners Association could not spin it anymore. The county launched a full audit into Silver Pine's Homeowners Association operations, starting with financial records, then moving into permit violations, surveillance activities, and land use disputes. Karen Bishop and her inner circle were served subpoenas within 10 days. Their private Slack messages, obtained through discovery, revealed everything. They had known the dam was illegal. They had approved the fake parcel markers. They had created internal talking points to smear me as unstable and hostile. But the most damning message came from Karen herself. "Once we control the headwaters, we control the vote." Control the vote. That phrase hit harder than any bulldozer ever could, because it was not about water, not entirely. It was about power. Every homeowner in Silver Pines who received water downstream, whether through municipal pipes or homeowners association-run irrigation, would suddenly be dependent on Karen's approval. She could shape policy, approve developments, enforce landscaping restrictions, even tie water access to compliance with homeowners association rules. It was a coup in slow motion, and it nearly worked. But now the whole scheme lay bare. Homeowners association members who had once stood silent began resigning. 3 board officials stepped down in one weekend. Anonymous letters started arriving at the county office, some with copies of internal budgets, others with photos of construction equipment being paid for out of community improvement funds. One email simply read, "It was not just Hank. They did it to all of us." Meanwhile, I found myself in the odd position of being recognized. People drove up the ridge just to shake my hand. A high school civics class invited me to speak on property rights. Some internet content creator offered to send me a brand new drone and make a mini documentary. I declined, politely. That was not why I had done it. But I will not lie, it felt good to be seen, to be heard. After months of being portrayed as the villain, the madman, the rogue bulldozer operator, I was finally just what I had always been, a man protecting what was his. Still, the fallout was not over. One afternoon, while repairing the wooden steps down to the creek, I heard tires crunching gravel. I turned to see a sedan pulling up. Not a county car, not a sheriff's cruiser. It was Karen Bishop. She stepped out slowly, umbrella in hand, heels sinking into the damp dirt. She wore a dark green trench coat, probably the same one from the press conference, and sunglasses, even though the sky was overcast. "Mr. Delaney," she said curtly. Karen and I nodded, keeping my hands on the rail I was fixing. She looked around. Her eyes lingered on the creek, now rushing freely through the spot where the dam had once stood. Her lips tightened. I came to talk. I did not reply. "I did not intend for this to go so far," she said, her voice straining between rehearsed apology and residual pride. "We believed we were doing the right thing for the community." I let the hammer rest on the rail and met her gaze. "You impersonated law enforcement, stole water, built dams on private property, lied to your members. What part of that was right?" She flinched, a small thing, barely visible. "I am stepping down," she said finally. "At the end of the quarter, I will not be seeking re-election." "That is not enough," I said. "You do not just walk away from this like it was a bad season of television. What do you want then?" "Accountability," I said. "Public. Transparent. Not for me, this is not about revenge, but for the people you manipulated, the neighbors you lied to, the land you tried to steal." She was silent for a long time. Then she turned, opened her car door, and paused. "You really think you have won, do you not?" I looked at the water behind her. I did not come here to win. I came here to restore what was broken. She did not answer. She got in the car and drove off. A few days later, the Homeowners Association hosted an emergency town hall. I did not attend. But Joe did. He said the room was tense, packed to the walls. Karen announced her resignation and cited a need to refocus on personal health. No apology, no confession. But the community knew, and in their eyes, that was enough. The county investigation continued. Charges were pending not just against Karen, but against the consultant who helped her route the culvert, the landscaper who forged the dam invoice, and the board secretary who helped falsify the parcel overlay. Elaine told me it would take months, maybe longer. But the slow grind of justice had begun, and I would be there to see it through. I spent the following weeks rebuilding my trails. Alone mostly. The air was clearer, the creek louder. Wildlife had returned: songbirds, fox tracks, even a black bear spotted near the Watchman tree. Nature did not need an apology. It just needed space to heal. One afternoon, I stood at the edge of the ridge, watching the sun fall behind the pines, golden light dancing on the water. And for the first time in a long time, I did not feel like I was guarding something. I felt like I was part of it again. The land had been bruised, but not broken, and neither had I. Autumn came late that year. The leaves held their green longer than usual, like the forest itself was refusing to let go of the sunlight. But eventually, the change came slow, golden, and quiet, just like the healing. By October, the ridge looked different. Not because anything dramatic had been built or torn down, no big gestures, no banners or fences, but because for the first time in years, it was free of interference. The water ran clean again. Trails once choked by debris now welcomed hikers. The noise of conflict had finally receded, replaced by the steady hush of wind through fir needles and the soft churn of creek water over polished stones. I woke up every morning with that sound. Not the buzz of emails or the crunch of gravel from unwanted homeowners association patrols, but the voice of the land. It was the same voice my father had listened to, the same one he taught me to respect. The lawsuits had mostly resolved by then. Karen Bishop, though never criminally convicted, settled out of court with the county for misappropriation of funds and resigned all homeowners association leadership roles permanently. The homeowners association itself was placed under temporary county oversight pending a full structural review. They lost their water management privileges, their patrol privileges, and their ability to redraw community boundaries without county approval. In other words, they were put back in their place. It did not undo the damage, but it was a start. Elaine and I kept pushing. With the help of Victor Tron, the city water analyst, who had first messaged me, we submitted a formal application to designate the Upper Maple Creek Watershed as a protected conservation zone managed by a local land trust. The idea was not new. My father had written the original draft 20 years ago. He just never had the political support to finish it. But now the momentum was different. Now people had seen what unchecked homeowners association power could do. Now they believed in something better. We called the project Sacred Flow, after the spot where I had found the second illegal dam. Elaine said the name would resonate with the grant committees. I said it would have made my father proud. It passed, unanimously. In a small ceremony beside the creek, the county commissioner handed me a framed certificate signed and sealed that officially designated the Upper Watershed as a community trust reserve, immune from residential development, corporate exploitation, or homeowners association interference. From this point forward, she said this land answers to no one but the land itself. People clapped. Joe cried a little. Elaine squeezed my arm. I did not say much that day. I did not need to. The ridge said it for me. But later I walked the trail alone, boots crunching over red needles and damp soil, until I reached the clearing where the main dam used to be. The ground had begun to heal soft moss creeping back over the scars, birds nesting in the eaves of trees that once stood silent under concrete shadows. And right there on a flat stone beside the stream, I placed a small plaque. It was simple, brass, weatherproof, nothing flashy. It read, "In memory of those who protected the flow. Let no one dam what was meant to be free." I sat with it for a while, thought about the first time I heard the creek as a boy chasing frogs, while my dad marked survey lines with orange ribbon. Thought about that summer we dug a tiny footbridge together using nothing but hand tools and stubbornness. Thought about how many storms this place had weathered, natural and man-made, and how it was still standing, still flowing, still alive. The press stopped calling eventually. The viral videos faded into the algorithm. People moved on as they always do. But not me. I stayed. Not out of bitterness, but out of duty. Because I had seen what happens when we look away. The Homeowners Association still existed, slimmer now, humbled. A new board had been elected, one with a teacher, a nurse, and even Joe, who agreed to serve as treasurer on the condition that no one ever again would be allowed to wear fake uniforms. We laughed about that over coffee one morning, sitting on my porch while bees buzzed in the warm air. "You ever think about joining the board yourself?" Joe asked. I nearly spit out my drink. "And let them fine me for painting my mailbox red? Hell no." He grinned. Had to ask. What I did do, though, was right. Elaine encouraged me to start a blog just to tell the full story in my own words. Not a rant, not a takedown, but a warning. A chronicle of how fragile freedom can be even in a quiet suburban town, and how dangerous small abuses of power become when left unchecked. I called it Creekline Defense. It grew. People from all over the country wrote in telling their own stories of homeowners association overreach land disputes and quiet retaliation. Some were heartbreaking. Some were absurd. But all of them shared one truth: people were tired of being bullied on their own property. So we built something. Not a movement, not exactly, but a network. We shared legal templates, case precedents, county loopholes. Elaine even held a few free webinars on property rights. I just showed up, talked about bulldozers and boundary lines and what it felt like to push back finally for something that mattered. And as winter approached, with snow dusting the tips of the pines, I felt something shift inside me. Not closure, but peace. Because in the end, this was not just about land. It was about standing still when everyone told you to sit down. About defending what was right when it would have been easier to fold. About holding the line not with weapons but with truth and grit and generations of memory beneath your boots. And most of all, it was about the water. Always the water. Free now. Forever.